The alarms blared across Kalen's small transport vessel as the targeting systems locked onto the approaching Starry Patrol ships. Their sleek, predatory designs sliced through the black void of space, illuminated by the distant red dwarf star of this forgotten system. Kalen's hands moved with practiced precision across the controls, his face set in concentration rather than fear. Unidentified vessel, you have entered restricted starry space. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. The cold, metallic voice echoing through his comms carried the unmistakable harmonics of translated starry speech. Kalen ignored the command, pushing his ship into a tight spiral as the first volley of warning shots streaked past his hull. This is your final warning. Surrender or be destroyed. Kalen checked the encrypted data packet securely stored in his ship's hidden compartment. The information had cost too many lives to lose now. He'd known the risk of cutting through starry space, but the intelligence had indicated this patrol route was clear for another 6 hours. Someone had set him up. His ship rocked violently as the first direct hit connected. Shield status indicators dropped from green to amber. 3 starry destroyers against his modified light freighter. The odds were impossible. But Kalen hadn't survived the massacre on Helios colony by accepting impossible odds. He threw the ship into a series of evasive maneuvers that no commercial pilot should have known, much less executed. For several minutes, he held them off, picking out weak spots in their formation and exploiting them with bursts of unexpected acceleration and targeting their blind spots. But the Starry weren't the dominant military force in this sector by accident. They adjusted their strategy, coordinating their attacks with ruthless efficiency. A second hit followed, then a third. His shields failed. Clever human, came the voice again, this time with a note of grudging respect. But futile, a final blast crippled his engines. As his ship drifted helplessly, Kalen initiated the emergency purge sequence for his encrypted data, watching as the critical information was scattered across thousands of untraceable quantum-encrypted fragments through subspace. At least the mission data wouldn't fall into their hands. The docking procedure was executed with brutal precision. When the airlock doors opened, 6 armored Starry warriors poured in, their tall, angular bodies encased in biomechanical exosuits that amplified their already considerable strength. Kalen raised his hands slowly, his face betraying nothing of the calculations running through his mind. "Search the vessel," ordered the squad leader, the intricate patterns of bioluminescent markings on his armor indicating high rank. Kalen allowed himself to be restrained without resistance. Fighting now would only get him killed. Survival first, then escape. Then the mission could continue. The Starry methodically tore apart his ship, searching for contraband or intelligence. They found nothing but the empty data drive, scrubbed clean by his security protocols. The squad leader approached, towering over Kalen. "Identity," he demanded. "Ren Tavar," Kalen replied with a well-crafted cover identity. "Independent merchant. I must have miscalculated my navigation route." The Starry commander's compound eyes narrowed, the facets glittering with cold intelligence. "A merchant who flies like a military pilot and carries weapons-grade encryption technology? I think not." He gestured to his subordinates. "Take him to the Xylos. The interrogators will discover the truth." Kalen's expression remained neutral, but internally, a chill ran through him. Xylos, the prison planet, the arena world. Few who entered ever returned to tell of its horrors. The processing center on the Starry cruiser was clinical and efficient. Kalen was stripped, scanned, and subjected to a series of invasive examinations. They took samples of his blood, tissue, and DNA, cataloging him like a specimen. His attempts to maintain his cover identity were met with silent indifference. The Starry weren't interested in who he claimed to be, only in what use they could extract from him. "Categorization, combatant," announced the processing officer after reviewing his physical assessment. "Designation, arena fodder." What followed was systematic dehumanization. His clothes were replaced with a coarse gray prisoner uniform. A neural inhibitor was implanted at the base of his skull, not to control his mind, but to trigger excruciating pain if he attempted escape or violence outside sanctioned combat. Finally came the branding. They used a molecular bonding technique that invaded the dermal layers with nanites, forming the unmistakable mark of his thari slave on the side of his neck. The pain was excruciating, designed to break the spirit as much as mark the flesh. Kalen endured it without a sound, retreating, deep into the mental discipline he had honed through years of specialized training. The Thari monitors noted his unusual pain tolerance with clinical interest. "This one is different," observed one technician to another. "Note the scarring patterns consistent with previous combat experience. And the pain response is abnormal." "It matters not," replied the senior officer. "On Xylos, all differences are eventually ground to dust." The journey to Xylos took 3 days in hypersleep. Kalen awoke as the prisoner transport entered the atmosphere of the desolate world. From a small viewport in the holding bay, he caught glimpses of a rust-colored landscape, barren except for massive structures that rose from the dust like the bones of ancient beasts. The great arena dominated the horizon, a colossal amphitheater that could hold thousands of spectators, built from materials harvested from the planet's crust. The slaves were herded like cattle from the transport into a processing facility hewn from the red rock. The smell hit Kalen immediately. Sweat, blood, and fear mingled with alien disinfectants that burned the nostrils. Thari guards monitored every movement, shock staffs ready to discipline any who stepped out of line. "Forward, slaves!" barked a translator device carried by one of the guards. "Welcome to Xylos, your final home." Kalen memorized every turn, every security checkpoint, every potential weakness in the facility's design. His eyes cataloged the guard rotations, the camera placements, the rudimentary layout of the complex. Nothing obvious presented itself as an escape route, but he was just beginning to learn this place. The slave pens were located deep underground, away from the harsh radiation of Xylos' sun. The accommodations were sparse. Sleeping pallets arranged in tight rows, communal washing facilities, and food dispensers that provided the bare minimum nutritional requirements. Privacy was non-existent. Strength, or the perception of it, was the only currency that mattered here. As new arrivals, Kalen and the other prisoners were quickly assessed by the established hierarchy. A massive, reptilian creature with a patchwork of scars across its scaled hide approached their group, flanked by 2 equally imposing specimens of different species. "Fresh meat," it hissed through a translator device implanted in its throat. "I am Drex, and these are my pens. You survive by my grace. You fight when I say fight. You die when I decide you are no longer useful." Drex stopped in front of Kalen, studying him with slitted yellow eyes. "This one has the look of a fighter," it commented, reaching out to grab Kalen's jaw. Kalen allowed the contact, but his eyes locked onto Drex's with an intensity that made the creature pause. There was no fear in that gaze, only cold calculation. "Interesting." Drex withdrew its hand. "We'll see how long that spirit lasts." In the days that followed, Kalen maintained a deliberate low profile. He observed the social dynamics of the slave pens, the alliances and rivalries that formed and dissolved with brutal frequency. He ate the tasteless nutrition paste, exercised methodically in the limited space afforded to him, and spoke only when necessary. Some mistook his silence for fear or stupidity. The smarter ones recognized it as careful assessment. Food was a constant source of conflict. The dispensers provided just enough sustenance for survival, but the strong often took from the weak. On the 3rd day, when a 6-armed Krell tried to seize Kalen's ration, he reacted with economical violence. A single strike to a nerve cluster that temporarily paralyzed 3 of the alien's arms. The movement was so quick, so precise, that many didn't even see what happened. Kalen simply continued eating as the Krell writhed on the ground. Word spread quickly. The quiet human was dangerous. He was given space after that, and with it, the freedom to continue his observations undisturbed. The first time Kalen witnessed the arena games, he was part of a labor detail tasked with cleaning the holding pens beneath the massive structure. The roar of the crowd above vibrated through the stone as two combatants fought to the death. Blood, some red, some in colors Kalen had never seen before, seeped through drainage grates at their feet. "That's Commander Lyra," whispered one of the older slaves, a thin human with a permanent stoop. He pointed upward. "Thari elite warrior. Champion of the arena. They say she's killed over 100 challengers without taking a serious wound." Kalen glanced up at the vid screens that showed the combat for the workers below. A female's Thari moved with lethal grace across the arena floor. Unlike the bulkier males of her species, her form was lithe and quick, her exoskeleton armor form-fitting rather than bulky. She wielded twin energy blades that left trails of light as they sliced through the air, and eventually through her opponent, a hulking creature that collapsed in a spray of violet blood. The crowd's adulation was deafening. "She wasn't always an arena fighter," continued the old slave. "Rumor is she was a military commander who fell from grace. Fighting here is her path to redemption." Kalen studied her technique, the way she moved, the patterns in her attacks. Every piece of information was potentially useful. The Thari were formidable warriors, but they had weaknesses, just like any species. Their exoskeletons, while tough, had junction points that were more vulnerable. Their vision, though excellent in most conditions, had specific blind spots. These were details he had learned during his time with the Helios Defense Force before the colony fell. He was so absorbed in his analysis that he almost missed the overseer's approach. "You." The Thari guard pointed at Kalen. "Report to processing. You've been selected." "Selected." The word sent a ripple of fear through the slaves around him. Everyone knew what it meant. The arena awaited. Processing for arena combatants was different from the initial intake. Kalen was subjected to another round of scans and tests, this time focused on combat potential. They measured his reflexes, strength, and endurance. They noted his unusual calm, the way his heartbeat barely elevated even during stress tests. "Classification confirmed," announced the arena master, a Thari with elaborate ceremonial scarification across his exoskeleton. "This one fights tomorrow in the proving ground matches." Kalen was fitted with minimal armor, merely padded coverings for vital areas, and allowed to select from a limited array of basic weapons. He chose a simple fighting staff, a weapon that appeared non-threatening but offered versatility in trained hands. The Thari observer made note of his choice with apparent amusement. "A primitive weapon for a primitive species," it commented. "It will make your death more entertaining." That night in isolation, Kalen meditated, focusing his mind and preparing his body. The proving ground matches were preliminary bouts, usually not to the death, but designed to assess a fighter's potential for the main arena. It could be an opportunity, a chance to gather more information about the facility, perhaps even to make contact with others who might share his interest in escape. The following day, Kalen was led up from the holding cells into a small antechamber beneath the proving ground. The roar of the crowd filtered down from above, along with the harsh sunlight that streamed through the grated ceiling. Other combatants waited in similar cells, some pacing nervously, others sitting in resigned silence. A shadow fell across Kalen's cell. Looking up, he saw the unmistakable silhouette of Commander Lyra, the arena champion. She had come to assess the new fighters personally. She was even more imposing up close. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, her exoskeleton was a deep blue-black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The bioluminescent patterns that marked her rank pulsed with a cold, blue glow. Her compound eyes studied Kalen with the detached interest of a scientist examining a curious specimen. "So this is the human who fights today." Her voice carried the characteristic harmonic overlay of Thari's speech, but there was something else beneath it, a note of disdain, perhaps even hatred. "Your kind lacks the strength, the endurance, and the will to be truly worthy opponents." Kalen remained seated, his expression neutral, his eyes meeting hers without challenge or submission. Lyra's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or irritation. "I lost good warriors to humans during the Helios campaign. Clever tactics, deception, ambushes." She leaned closer to the bars. But here, in the arena, there is nowhere to hide. No clever strategies to employ. Only combat, pure and direct. Kalen's expression didn't change, but a slight tension in his jaw betrayed him. Helios. She had been there. Lyra noticed the reaction, her compound eyes narrowing. You know of Helios. Perhaps you lost someone there? Family? Friends? She waited for a response, but Kalen gave none. It was a necessary cleansing. Your colony harbored terrorists. The entire population was complicit. It was a lie, of course. Helios had been a scientific outpost, neutral in the ongoing conflicts of the sector. Its only crime had been discovering something the Thari wanted kept hidden. The matches begin soon. Lyra continued when Kalen remained silent. I arranged for your opponent myself, a Draxian Blade Master. He has killed 17 consecutive challengers. She stepped closer, her armored form casting Kalen in shadow. You will be 18. Kalen finally spoke, his voice quiet but clear. Why take such interest in one human slave? Lyra's head tilted slightly. Perhaps I sense something different in you. A spark worth extinguishing personally. Her mandibles clicked again. Survive today, human, and perhaps you'll earn the honor of facing me in the true arena. As she turned to leave, she paused. What is your name, slave? I like to know the names of those who die for my entertainment. Kalen met her gaze evenly. Kalen, she repeated, the Thari pronunciation giving the name an alien quality. Remember your place, Kalen. You're nothing here. Less than nothing. With a sudden motion that caught even Kalen off guard, Lyra spat at him. A gesture she had clearly learned from humans, as it was not natural to Thari physiology. The viscous fluid hit his cheek and slid down to his jaw. Kalen didn't flinch, didn't wipe it away, simply held her gaze with an intensity that, for the briefest moment, seemed to unsettle the Thari commander. Prepare yourself, slave, she said, recovering her composure. Your death approaches. The summons came an hour later. Kalen was escorted up to the arena entrance by 2 guards. The proving ground was smaller than the main arena, but still large enough to hold several hundred spectators. Today, it was filled to capacity, the crowd a mix of Thari elite and representatives from various client species who had adopted Thari culture. Across the sand-covered floor, his opponent waited. The Draxian was an imposing figure, 7 feet of corded muscle and armored hide, with 4 arms each gripping a curved blade that caught the harsh sunlight. Its face was a nightmare of mandibles and eyes, set in an expression of perpetual rage. Kalen stepped forward, the simple fighting staff held loosely in one hand. The contrast between the 2 combatants couldn't have been more stark. The massive, heavily armed Draxian against the seemingly unprepared human with his primitive weapon. In the elevated viewing box, Lyra watched with cold anticipation, surrounded by other Thari officers and dignitaries. Her position as arena champion afforded her certain privileges, including the right to select matches for her own entertainment. This human had caught her interest, though she couldn't fully articulate why. Perhaps it was the unusual calmness in his eyes, or the way he had reacted to the mention of Helios. You honor us with your presence, Champion Lyra, said a decorated military officer to her right. Is this combat worthy of your attention? We shall see, she replied, her eyes fixed on Kalen. There is something unusual about this human. The arena master's voice boomed across the proving ground. Today we witness the trial of a new slave. Kalen of Earth faces Gornthau, Blade Master of Draxus Prime. The crowd roared its approval, hungry for blood. Let combat commence. The Draxian charged immediately, all 4 blades moving in a deadly pattern designed to overwhelm any defense. Kalen stood motionless until the last possible second, then moved, a simple sidestep that allowed the Draxian's momentum to carry it past him. The crowd murmured in surprise. Gornthau recovered quickly, spinning to face Kalen with a growl of frustration. This time its attack was more measured, 2 blades testing Kalen's defenses while the others remained ready to counter. Kalen used his staff to deflect the probing attacks, his movements economical and precise. For several minutes, this dance continued, the Draxian attacking with increasing fury, Kalen defending with minimal movement. The crowd grew restless, expecting either a quick kill or at least a display of aggression from the human. In her viewing box, Lyra leaned forward, her compound eyes narrowed in concentration. The human's technique was unlike anything she had seen before. Not the standard military training of Earth forces, nor any recognized martial discipline. It was as if he had distilled combat to its purest essentials, stripped of all unnecessary movement or flourish. "He toys with the Draxian," she murmured. "Surely not," replied the officer beside her. "The human merely delays the inevitable." Below, the battle reached a critical point. The Draxian, frustrated by its inability to land a blow, committed to an all-out assault, all four blades moving in a whirlwind of lethal edges. Instead of retreating, Kalen stepped into the attack. What happened next occurred so quickly that many spectators missed it entirely. Kalen's staff struck with precision at nerve clusters and joint articulations, exploiting weaknesses in the Draxian's anatomy that few non-Draxians even knew existed. Within seconds, 3 of the 4 arms hung useless, their blades dropped to the sand. The 4th blade was twisted from its owner's grasp and sent spinning away. The Draxian stood stunned, paralyzed by precisely targeted strikes to its central nervous system. Kalen positioned the end of his staff against its throat, a clear killing position. The arena fell silent. In that moment of suspended time, Kalen's eyes lifted to the viewing box, finding Lyra's gaze across the distance. There was no triumph in his expression, no satisfaction, only a cold, implacable purpose that sent an involuntary shiver through this Thari champion. Then, instead of delivering the killing blow, Kalen lowered his staff and stepped back. The message was clear to any warrior. I could have killed, but chose not to. The ultimate insult in arena combat. The crowd erupted, some in anger at being denied blood, others in reluctant admiration for the unexpected display of skill. The arena master, after a moment of confusion, raised his staff. Victory to the human slave, Kalen. As the guards led him from the arena, Kalen's face remained expressionless. But inwardly, the seeds of a plan were beginning to form. He had made himself noticed. Now he needed to leverage that attention to further his true mission on Xylos. In a viewing box, Lyra stood abruptly, her bioluminescent markings pulsing with emotion. "I want that slave prepared for the main arena," she announced. "He faces me in 3 days." The 3 days that followed were a blur of heightened security and special conditioning. Kalen was moved from the general slave pens to an isolation cell, ostensibly for his protection, but more likely to prevent any potential interference with a highly anticipated match. His meals were monitored for tampering, his exercise periods supervised by elite guards rather than the usual overseers. The attention served his purposes. Every new guard, every change in routine, every transfer between facilities gave him more information about Xylos' security systems and protocols. He maintained his mask of quiet compliance, revealing nothing of his true intentions. On the night before the match, Kalen was surprised by a visitor. The door to his isolation cell slid open to reveal Commander Lyra, accompanied by only 2 guards rather than the usual contingent. "Leave us," she ordered the guards. "Remain outside." The guards hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances. "The slave is restrained and the neural inhibitor is active," she snapped. "I am in no danger. Now go." When they had withdrawn, Lyra studied Kalen in silence. He sat on the simple sleeping platform, his back straight, his hands resting on his knees. The restraints around his wrists hummed with suppression energy, but they seemed almost superfluous given his complete stillness. "You are a puzzle, Kalen of Earth," she finally said. "The Draxian you faced has killed 18 opponents. 18, yet you disabled him in seconds." Kalen remained silent, his eyes meeting hers without expression. "Your technique was familiar," she continued, pacing the small cell. "It reminded me of a specialized unit we encountered on Helios. They called themselves Phantoms, infiltration specialists, assassins, A barely perceptible tightening around Kalen's eyes was the only indication that her words had any effect. Most were killed in the initial bombardment, Lyra continued. A few were captured. They died under interrogation rather than reveal their missions or methods. She stopped pacing and faced him directly. I thought we had eliminated all of them. Yet here you are. I'm just a transport pilot who took a wrong turn, Kalen replied, his voice neutral. Lyra made a sound that might have been laughter. Still maintaining your cover story? Admirable, but pointless. Tomorrow, in the arena, your true nature will be revealed. Under threat of death, every being shows their authentic self. Perhaps you could have killed the Draxian. Why didn't you? Kalen considered the question. Killing wasn't necessary to win. In the arena, killing is the point, Lyra countered. Victory without death is considered unsatisfying. I don't fight for the crowd's satisfaction. Lyra moved closer, her tall form looming over him. What do you fight for, Phantom? What brings one of Helios's legendary shadows to Xylos? Kalen remained silent. Tomorrow, we fight, she said after the silence had stretched uncomfortably. No restraints, no inhibitors, pure combat. If you defeat me, which you won't, you earn the right of Imperial Challenge. One request that must be granted within reason. This was unexpected. The right of Imperial Challenge was an ancient Thari tradition, rarely extended to non-Thari combatants. Why offer this? Kalen asked, genuine curiosity breaking through his reserve. Lyra's compound eyes studied him intently. Because you're the first worthy opponent I have faced in 3 cycles. Because victory means nothing if the challenge isn't real. She leaned closer. And because I want to know what you would ask for. With that, she straightened and moved toward the door. Rest well, Phantom. Tomorrow, one of us joins the honored dead. As she departed, Kalen's mind worked furiously. The right of Imperial Challenge could be exactly what he needed. A legitimate way to access restricted areas or information that would otherwise be impossible to reach. But first, he would have to defeat one of the most formidable warriors in Thari space, in front of thousands of bloodthirsty spectators. The day of the match dawned clear and hot, Xylos's red sun beating down mercilessly on the arena. By midday, when the main events were scheduled to begin, the temperature in the sand-covered combat zone would approach 110 degrees Fahrenheit, punishing for humans, but optimal for Thari physiology. Kalen was prepared in the underground chambers, fitted with light combat armor that covered his torso and limbs but left his head exposed. It was primarily ceremonial, designed to prolong the combat rather than offer real protection. He was allowed to select weapons from an impressive array. Once again, he chose the simple fighting staff, much to the amusement of the arena attendants. Still clinging to your primitive stick, human, mocked the weapon's master. Commander Lyra will split it and you in half with the first strike of her energy blades. Kalen tested the weight and balance of the staff, then nodded, ignoring the taunt. This will do. The weight in the holding cell beneath the arena seemed interminable. Above, he could hear the crowd growing larger and more raucous as preliminary matches concluded. The main event, the champion versus the mysterious human slave, had generated unprecedented interest. Rumor had it that even high-ranking officials from the Thari Central Worlds had traveled to witness the spectacle. Time, announced the guard, opening the cell. The arena awaits, slave. The walk to the lift platform was deliberately designed to intimidate. Passing the medical facilities where the grievously wounded were treated, then the morgue where the dead were processed, and finally past the wall of champions where the names of victors were inscribed in living crystal. The platform rose with a mechanical groan, lifting Kalen into the blinding sunlight of the arena. The crowd's roar was deafening, a physical pressure against his eardrums. The arena was massive, capable of holding 20,000 spectators, and today it appeared to be filled to capacity. Across the sand, another platform rose, bearing Commander Lyra. She was magnificent and terrifying, her armor a gleaming blue-black that seemed to drink in the sunlight, her twin energy blades humming with deadly potential. Unlike Kalen, she wore no helmet, a statement of absolute confidence in her skills. The arena master's voice boomed across the vast space. Today, we witness a clash of worlds. Commander Lyra, champion of Xylos, pride of the Starry Empire, faces the human slave Kalen. The crowd's response was thunderous. Commander Lyra has granted the right of imperial challenge to this combat. Should the human emerge victorious, the arena master paused for dramatic effect, which our glorious champion has assured me is impossible. He will be granted one request within the bounds of imperial law. More cheers and jeers filled the air. Combatants approached the center ring. Kalen walked forward, his movements measured and calm despite the hostility emanating from the stands. Lyra approached from the opposite direction, her longer stride eating up the distance with predatory grace. They met in the center, where the arena master waited. Traditional protocol required combatants to salute each other before battle, a gesture of respect between warriors. Lyra looked down at Kalen, her compound eyes glittering in the harsh sunlight. "I studied the phantom technique after Helios," she said, her voice pitched to reach only his ears beneath the crowd's noise. "Your people died bravely. Some took their own lives rather than reveal their secrets." Kalen's expression remained neutral, but inside, old wounds reopened. He had been off-world when the attack came, running a mission that turned out to be a diversion. By the time he returned, Helios was a smoking ruin, its people either dead or taken for interrogation. He had spent the 3 years since then hunting those responsible, gathering intelligence, and preparing for the moment when he could extract justice, or at least the truth. "I will not extend you the same courtesy today," Lyra continued. She raised her hand in what appeared to be the beginning of the traditional salute, then suddenly spat in his face for the second time. "Know your place, slave." The crowd roared its approval at the display of contempt. The arena master, far from intervening, seemed amused by the breach of protocol. Kalen didn't move, didn't wipe away the fluid that dripped down his cheek. He simply looked at Lyra with those unervingly calm eyes that had begun to disturb her more than she cared to admit. "Return to your starting positions," ordered the arena master. "Combat begins on the signal." They retreated to opposite sides of the combat circle, a 30-meter diameter space marked in the sand with red pigment. Beyond this boundary, automated defense systems would drive combatants back into the fighting zone. Kalen assumed a neutral stance, the staff held loosely in his right hand. Lyra activated her energy blades, the weapons extending to their full length with a distinctive hum that carried even over the crowd's noise. The signal, a deep, resonant gong, sounded. Lyra didn't waste time with preliminaries. She launched herself forward with explosive speed, covering the distance between them in seconds. Her first strike was a blinding series of cuts designed to overwhelm any defense, energy blades leaving trails of light in their wake. Kalen didn't attempt to parry the energy weapons with his staff. That would have been suicide. Instead, he moved, a fluid evasion that seemed to anticipate Lyra's attacks before they occurred. The crowd gasped as the human slipped through gaps in the Starry-S offense that shouldn't have existed. Lyra pressed her attack, driving Kalen toward the boundary with relentless combinations. Her technique was flawless, centuries of starry martial tradition executed with the precision of a master. Yet she couldn't land a single blow on the human, who moved like water around stone, always just beyond her reach. Frustration began to build in Lyra, evidenced by the increasing glow of her bioluminescent markings. She had expected resistance, even skill, but this was beyond anything she had anticipated. The human wasn't fighting back. He was simply not being hit. It was as if he could read her intentions before she acted on them. "Fight, coward," she snarled, her voice carrying across the now-hushed arena. The spectators had fallen into a surprised silence, witnessing something unprecedented. 15 seconds had passed since the signal, an eternity in high-level combat. In those 15 seconds, the champion of Xylos had failed to land a single blow on an apparently unarmed human slave. Then, in a moment so brief, many would later debate exactly what they had seen, everything changed. Kalen stopped retreating. His staff, which had seemed almost an afterthought until now, suddenly moved with blinding speed. Not to strike Lyra's armored body or limbs, but to target specific, seemingly random points in the air around her. To the uninitiated, it appeared as though he was fighting shadows. In reality, he was intercepting the exact points where Lyra's attacks would have passed, creating momentary disruptions in the energy fields of her blades. This technique, developed by the Phantoms specifically for combating energy weapons, created split-second vulnerabilities that were invisible to anyone not trained to see them. In those vulnerabilities, Kalen struck, not with the blunt force of the staff, but with precisely calculated touches to nerve clusters and pressure points that existed in Sthari physiology. Each touch was virtually invisible to the crowd, appearing as nothing more than a brush of his hand or a graze of the staff. But to Lyra, the effect was catastrophic. First came numbness in her right arm, causing her to drop one energy blade. Then a strange paralysis spread through her left side, making her stumble. A third strike to a point behind her mandible disrupted her equilibrium, sending her sprawling to the sand. The crowd watched in stunned silence as their champion lay helpless, her remaining energy blade sputtering out as it fell from nerveless fingers. Standing over her was the human slave, his expression unchanged, his breathing steady as if he had exerted no effort at all. 15 seconds. From the signal to Lyra's defeat, 15 seconds had elapsed. Kalen looked down at the Sthari commander, his staff positioned for a killing strike. The traditional death blow that would cement his victory and earn him the right of Imperial challenge. The crowd, recovering from its shock, began to call for blood. Kill! 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 The chant echoed across the arena, building in intensity with each repetition. The arena master approached cautiously, unsure how to proceed in this unprecedented situation. Lyra's compound eyes locked with Kalen's. There was confusion there, and anger, but also a dawning realization. How? She managed to ask, her voice distorted by the partial paralysis. Instead of answering, instead of striking, Kalen did something even more unexpected. He lowered his staff and stepped back. Then, with deliberate movements, he turned his back on the fallen champion and walked toward the arena exit, surrendering the right to kill that was his by combat law. The crowd's reaction was immediate and violent, a wave of outrage that threatened to spill over into riot. The arena master hurried to intercept Kalen before he could leave the combat circle. "The victory is not complete," he shouted over the crowd's roar. "You must finish it according to tradition." Kalen looked at him with those disturbingly calm eyes. "I have one," he stated simply. "She lives because I permit it. The Imperial challenge is mine by right." The arena master hesitated, caught between tradition and the undeniable fact of Lyra's defeat. Behind them, medical attendants were rushing to assist the fallen champion, their movements frantic and uncertain. "The right of Imperial challenge stands," the arena master finally declared. "The human slave Kalen has earned one request, to be granted within the bounds of Imperial law." The crowd's displeasure manifested in a barrage of objects thrown toward the arena floor, most dissolving in the defensive energy fields before they could reach their target. Kalen ignored the chaos, his eyes fixed on the corridor leading back to the holding cells. "State your challenge, human," the arena master demanded. Kalen turned back, his voice clear and carrying despite its quiet tone. "I will speak my challenge only to the arena governor, as is my right under Section 4 of the Imperial Combat Code." The arena master's expression contorted with frustration. The human was surprisingly well-versed in Sthari law. "Very well. You will be escorted to the governor's chambers when he is available." Kalen was returned to an isolation cell, but one considerably more comfortable than his previous accommodations. The neural inhibitor had been deactivated as part of the combat preparations and, surprisingly, was not reactivated. Either an oversight, or more likely, a sign of the new respect his victory had earned. 3 hours passed before the summons came. 2 elite guards, their armor bearing the insignia of the governor's personal security detail, escorted Kalen through levels of the facility he had never seen before. The administrative section was a stark contrast to the brutal utilitarian design of the slave quarters, adorned with starry art and symbolic displays of imperial conquest. The governor's chamber was a vast room dominated by a circular platform where petitioners would stand while the governor observed from an elevated position. The symbolism was obvious, power and subservience made physically manifest. Governor Thrak was an imposing specimen even by his Thari standards. Ancient scarification patterns marked him as a veteran of the Unification Wars, conflicts that had taken place over a century ago. The life-extending technologies available to high-ranking Thari officials had kept him vital despite his advanced age. The human victor approaches, announced an aide as Kalen was led to the petitioner's circle. Thrak studied Kalen with eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations. Unprecedented, he finally said, his voice deep and resonant. No non-Zethari has ever defeated a champion in single combat. No slave has ever earned the right of imperial challenge in the history of Xylos. Kalen remained silent, standing in a relaxed posture that nevertheless suggested readiness. You understand what this means? Thrak continued. By law, I must grant your request if it falls within imperial boundaries. Choose carefully, human. Freedom is not an option. Neither is harm to any imperial citizen or property. I understand the limitations, Kalen replied. Then speak your challenge. Kalen's eyes never wavered from the governor's. I request access to the Helios archives stored in the secure data vault beneath this facility. The chamber fell silent. The governor's bioluminescent patterns flickered in what might have been surprise or alarm. How do you know of the archives? Thrak demanded, leaning forward. That is irrelevant to my challenge, Kalen replied calmly. The archives exist. They're within this facility. My request does not violate imperial law. Thrak's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. The Helios archives are classified at the highest level. Even I require special authorization to access them. Nevertheless, they fall within the bounds of possible requests. I have earned the right by combat. A tense silence followed as Thrak considered his options. The right of imperial challenge was ancient and sacred. To deny it would be to undermine one of the foundational tenets of Sthari culture. Yet to grant access to the Helios archives to a human, especially one who had demonstrated such unusual abilities, was potentially catastrophic. I will consult with Imperial Command, Thrak finally said. You will remain in custody until a decision is reached. Kalen was returned to his cell, his mind racing with possibilities. The governor's reaction had confirmed what he had long suspected. The truth about what happened at Helios Colony, the real reason for the massacre, was contained in those archives. Whether he would gain access to them remained to be seen, but he had forced the Sthari into a difficult position. Either way, his presence on Xylos was now a matter of high-level attention, which created both danger and opportunity. He was not surprised when, hours later, his cell door opened to reveal Commander Lyra. She had recovered from the paralysis he had induced, though she moved with a slight stiffness that suggested lingering effects. Her expression was unreadable, but the intensity of her compound eyes suggested barely contained emotion. Leave us, she ordered the guards, just as she had before their combat. This time, they complied without hesitation. When they were alone, Lyra circled Kalen's cell like a predator, studying him from every angle. Phantom technique, she finally said. Advanced nerve manipulation. Pressure point exploitation adapted specifically for his Thari physiology. She stopped directly in front of him. Who are you really? Kalen of Earth? Kalen met her gaze evenly. You already know. A survivor of Helios, she acknowledged. But not just any survivor. One of their elite operatives. She resumed her pacing. What I don't understand is why you didn't kill me when you had the chance. By combat law, my life was forfeit. Killing you serves no purpose. No purpose? Lyra's bioluminescent patterns flared with sudden anger. I led the ground assault on Helios. I ordered the execution of prisoners. By your human standards, I am a war criminal deserving death. Kalen's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, a brief glimpse of the cold rage that drove him. Your death would change nothing. The truth about Helios remains hidden. That truth is my objective, not revenge. Lyra stopped pacing, her tall form suddenly still. The archives, she said quietly. That's what this is about. That's why you infiltrated starry space, why you allowed yourself to be captured and brought to Xylos. The arena was an unexpected complication, Kalen admitted, but adaptability is essential to any mission. Lyra made a sound that might have been laughter, though it held no humor. You used me. You used our combat as a means to invoke the right of imperial challenge. There was grudging respect in her voice. Clever, but futile. Governor Thrak will never grant access to the archives, regardless of ancient combat rights. Perhaps. Lyra moved closer, lowering her voice though they were alone. What do you expect to find in the archives? What could possibly be worth such an elaborate infiltration? Kalen was silent for a long moment, weighing his options. Lyra was an enemy, responsible for countless deaths, including possibly those of his comrades. Yet she was also a warrior bound by a code, however twisted by imperial propaganda. And she had been at Helios. She might know more than she realized. Helios Colony was a scientific outpost, he finally said. Its primary research focused on non-aggressive applications of quantum technology, medical advances, communication improvements, environmental restoration. That was the cover story, Lyra countered. Imperial intelligence confirmed weapons research. There were no weapons. Kalen's voice remained calm, but a hardness had entered it. What they discovered was something far more significant. Evidence that the Thari Empire had falsified its origin myths. Evidence that the divine right of Thari rule was a carefully constructed lie. Lyra's reaction was immediate and violent. She slammed an armored fist against the energy barrier separating them, causing it to flare brilliantly. Blasphemy, she hissed. The ancestral ascension is documented historical fact. Is it? Kalen asked quietly. Or is it the foundation of a convenient mythology that justifies imperial expansion and subjugation? The scientists at Helios found archaeological evidence suggesting the Thari were uplifted by another, older species. That your technological advancement was not self-achieved, but given to you, perhaps as a weapon against rival ancient powers. Lyra's bioluminescent patterns pulsed erratically. Impossible. These are lies meant to undermine imperial authority. Then why the complete destruction of a civilian research outpost? Why the execution of all witnesses? Why are the archives hidden beneath an arena on a forgotten prison world instead of celebrated in the Imperial Museum as proof of Thari superiority? The questions hung in the air between them. Lyra's compound eyes studied Kalen with an intensity that suggested internal conflict. She had been raised from hatching to believe in the divine right of Thari rule, in the natural superiority of her species. The suggestion that the foundation of imperial culture was a fabrication struck at the core of her identity. Even if this were true, she finally said, her voice quieter, revealing it would destabilize the entire empire. Billions would die in the resulting chaos. Client species would revolt. Ancient enemies would seize the opportunity to attack. Perhaps, Kalen acknowledged, or perhaps the truth would force the empire to evolve, to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than enforced subservience. Lyra made a dismissive gesture. Idealistic, human nonsense. The strong rule. The weak obey. This is the natural order. Is that why you're here on Xylos? Kalen asked. A champion in an arena on a prison world? Someone who believes in the natural order of strength would be leading imperial fleets, not entertaining crowds with choreographed combat. The question struck a nerve. Lyra's posture stiffened, her mandibles clicking rapidly. You know nothing of my circumstances. I know you were a decorated military commander. I know something happened that led to your reassignment. Something connected to Helios, perhaps. Lyra turned away, facing the wall of the cell. I questioned orders, she said, so quietly Kalen had a strain to hear. During the final phase of the Helios operation, I was instructed to execute all prisoners, including children. I hesitated, asked for confirmation. She turned back, her compound eyes reflecting the harsh cell lighting. That hesitation was reported. My loyalty was questioned. This assignment, champion of the Xylos arena, is both punishment and opportunity for redemption. And now I've defeated you publicly, Kalen observed, further damaging your path to redemption. Yes, the single word carried the weight of complicated emotions. By combat law, my life belongs to you. My honor is shattered. I will never regain my former position now. Kalen considered this information carefully. Lyra was a war criminal by human standards, responsible for countless deaths. Yet that moment of hesitation, that flicker of conscience regarding the execution of children, suggested a complexity to her character that might be useful. What if there was another path, he suggested, one that neither returns you to imperial favor nor leaves you disgraced in an arena? Lyra's head tilted slightly. Explain. Help me access the Helios archives. Discover the truth for yourself. Make your own judgment about whether the empire you've served deserves your continued loyalty. That would be treason, she said, but without the immediate rejection he might have expected. It would be seeking truth, Kalen countered. If the archives confirm imperial dogma, you lose nothing. If they reveal deception, you gain understanding. Lyra was silent for a long time, her internal conflict evident in the fluctuating patterns of bioluminescence across her exoskeleton. Finally, she spoke. Governor Thrak has denied your challenge request. You are to be executed tomorrow as an example to other slaves who might grow too ambitious. Kalen absorbed this information without visible reaction. And you came to inform me of this personally? I came to understand how you defeated me, she replied. Now, I have a different question. How do you plan to survive execution? I don't plan to be executed. Escape is impossible. Security has been tripled since your victory. Every guard knows your face. Kalen studied her intently. Why tell me this? Why not simply allow the execution to proceed? Lyra moved closer to the energy barrier, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Because you spare my life when combat law entitled you to take it. Because in 3 centuries of military service, I have begun to question the empire I was born to serve. And because if what you say about Helios is true, I have been complicit in an atrocity beyond redemption. It was the most honest thing she had said to him, stripped of imperial posturing and cultural conditioning. In that moment, despite everything that separated them, species, ideology, history, there was a connection. 2 warriors recognizing something in each other that transcended their differences. The archives are located on Sublevel 7, Lyra continued. Access requires both genetic authentication and command codes. Security includes automated defense systems and elite guards. Even with my help, reaching them would be nearly impossible. Impossible, Kalen echoed, but not completely impossible. A subtle distinction that may not matter when you're dead. Despite the grim words, there was something like dark humor in her tone. If you're serious about helping me, Kalen said, I'll need more than information. I'll need action. Lyra's compound eyes fixed on his. What specifically? A diversion. Access codes. Weapons. And a ship prepared for immediate departure once we have what we need from the archives. Lyra questioned. You can't stay after helping me. The Empire doesn't forgive treason. Lyra made a gesture of acknowledgement. There is a security shift change at 0300 hours. The execution is scheduled for midday. That gives us a narrow window. She hesitated. If I do this, if I help you, it means abandoning everything I've known. Becoming an outcast, hunted by my own kind. Sometimes the truth demands sacrifice, Kalen said quietly. Lyra studied him for a long moment, then made a decision that would alter the course of her life irrevocably. I will return. At 0245 hours. Be ready. When she left, Kalen sat in perfect stillness, his mind reviewing the conversation and adjusting his plans accordingly. Lyra was a wild variable, potentially a valuable ally, but equally a potential betrayer. Trust did not come easily to a phantom operative, especially not trust in someone directly responsible for the Helios massacre. Yet there was something in her manner, a fundamental honesty beneath the layers of imperial conditioning, that suggested genuine doubt about the empire she had served. Whether that doubt was sufficient to turn her into a true ally remained to be seen. The hours passed with excruciating slowness. Kalen used the time to prepare himself mentally and physically, running through various scenarios and contingencies. He practiced breathing techniques that would allow him to operate at peak efficiency despite stress and exertion. He reviewed mental maps of the facility based on his observations thus far. At precisely 0245 hours, the cell's energy barrier flickered and died. Lyra stood in the corridor, her tall form encased not in ceremonial arena armor, but in functional combat gear. She carried an equipment bag and wore an expression of tightly controlled tension. "The surveillance systems in this section have been looped," she said without preamble. "We have approximately 4 minutes before a standard security sweep detects the anomaly." Kalen rose from his seated position in a single, fluid motion. "You actually came." "I keep my word," she replied, handing him the equipment bag. Combat suit calibrated for human physiology. Sidearm with neural disruptor setting. Non-lethal, but effective against most species, including Thari. Access chip keyed to my genetic signature. As Kalen quickly donned the combat suit, Lyra continued. "I've programmed a maintenance vessel for emergency launch from Bay 14. Simple controls, enough fuel to reach the nearest neutral trading post. And the diversion? A staged riot in the general population's slave pens. Automated systems will lock down that section, drawing security personnel from other areas. It should begin in approximately 15 minutes. Kalen checked the sidearm, familiarizing himself with its design. "You've been thorough. I was a tactical commander before I was an arena fighter," she replied with a hint of pride. "Planning is what I was bred for." They moved through the corridors with practiced stealth, Lyra leading the way through sections of the facility that Kalen had never seen. The architecture changed as they descended, older, more utilitarian, with ancient Thari script carved into load-bearing columns. "These lower levels date back to the original construction," Lyra explained in a whisper. "Before Xylos was converted to an arena world, it was a research outpost itself." "Researching what?" Kalen asked as they paused at an intersection, waiting for a patrol to pass. "Unknown. Those records are also classified, but there are rumors that Xylos was home to artifacts similar to those discovered on Helios." This new information added another layer to the puzzle Kalen had been assembling. Perhaps Xylos and Helios were connected by more than just the presence of the archives. They had reached sublevel 5 when the alarm system activated. Not the expected alert for the slave uprising, but a more targeted alarm. "Cell breach detected," Lyra translated this Thari announcement. "They've discovered your absence sooner than expected. The diversion should still occur, but we need to move faster." She increased her pace, leading them down a maintenance shaft that bypassed standard security checkpoints. Sublevel 6 presented their first direct confrontation. 2 security officers were stationed at the entrance to the final descent. Lyra approached openly, her rank insignia clearly visible. "Commander Lyra," one of the guards acknowledged. "This area is restricted. Governor Thrak authorized my access," she replied smoothly. "The prisoner is being transferred to a more secure location pending execution." The guards exchanged glances. "We received no such orders." "The orders were issued directly to me," Lyra said, maintaining an authoritative tone. "If you wish to confirm with the governor and potentially disturb him during his regeneration cycle, that is your prerogative." The mention of disturbing a superior during the sacred regeneration time caused the guards visible discomfort. As they hesitated, Lyra struck with brutal efficiency, her attack targeting the same nerve clusters Kalen had exploited in their arena combat. Both guards dropped without raising an alarm. "Impressive," Kalen noted as they dragged the unconscious guards into a maintenance alcove. "I paid attention during our fight," Lyra replied. "The technique is effective." The final descent to sublevel 7 was via a secure lift that required both genetic authentication and command codes. Lyra provided both, her compound eyes fixed on the scanner as it verified her identity. "Access granted," announced the automated system. "Welcome, Commander Lyra." The lift descended smoothly into the heart of the facility. When the doors opened, they revealed not the utilitarian corridors of the upper levels, but a pristine research environment. The lighting was calibrated for optimal data visualization, the air filtered and temperature controlled to preserve sensitive materials. "The archives," Lyra said softly, leading Kalen to a central console. "All data recovered from Helios has been stored here. Access is compartmentalized. Even with my authentication, we'll only be able to retrieve portions." As Lyra worked the console, navigating through layers of security protocols, Kalen surveyed the room. Something about the design struck him as familiar, not starry architecture, but not human either. There was an organic quality to the curves and angles that suggested a different aesthetic entirely. "This wasn't built by Starry," he observed. Lyra glanced up from the console. "No. According to restricted briefings, this chamber predates Imperial presence on Xylos by at least 10,000 years. It was discovered intact during initial excavation, and the technology still functions after 10 millennia? Another mystery. The power source has never been identified. It simply works." She returned her attention to the console. "I've accessed the primary index. The data is extensive, hundreds of terabytes of research findings, archaeological surveys, xenobiological analyses. Search for references to origin or uplift," Kalen suggested. Lyra input the parameters. The system processed for several seconds, then displayed a list of heavily encrypted files. "These require additional authentication, governor level or higher." Kalen examined the console, noting design elements that echoed technologies he had seen at Helios before its destruction. "The interface isn't entirely starry," he observed. "There are elements of the original system incorporated into Imperial technology." An idea formed. The Phantoms had discovered that the ancient systems at Helios responded to specific thought patterns, a form of psychic interface that predated conventional computing. If the technology here was related, Kalen placed his hand on what appeared to be a decorative element of the console, a spiraling pattern that had no obvious function. He closed his eyes, focusing his thoughts as he had been trained to do at Helios, projecting a simple query: access. The console hummed beneath his touch. The display flickered, then stabilized with a completely different interface. Older, more complex, with symbols that belonged to no known language. Lyra stared in shock. "How did you do that?" "The original builders used psycho-responsive technology," Kalen explained, his concentration focused on maintaining the connection. "The Stari integrated their systems without fully understanding the underlying principles. Working with intuition as much as knowledge, Kalen navigated through the ancient system. Images and data streamed across the display. Archaeological sites, genetic analyses, comparative technological studies. The information was overwhelming in its scope and implications. There, Kalen indicated a particular file cluster. "Download that section." Lyra connected a portable data crystal to the console, initiating the transfer. As the data flowed, Kalen continued exploring the system, searching for specific confirmation of his theories about Helios and the Starry origins. He found it in a restricted section labeled with starry glyphs that translated roughly to extinction event. The files contained detailed archaeological evidence from both Helios and Xylos, meticulously documented and analyzed. The conclusions were unambiguous. "The Starry were not the first," Kalen said softly. "They were uplifted by another species, the architects, according to these records, given advanced technology, guided in their development. And then what?" Lyra asked, her voice strained. "They turned on their benefactors. A systematic genocide approximately 15,000 years ago. The Stari destroyed the very species that had elevated them from primitive development." Lyra's bioluminescent patterns flared with emotion. That cannot be true. The ancestral ascension was a cover story, Kalen finished, created to hide the truth of how the Empire began, not through divine right or natural superiority, but through betrayal and extermination. The data transfer completed with a soft chime. Lyra stared at the console, her worldview crumbling around her. Everything she had believed, everything she had fought for and killed for, was built on a foundation of lies. "We need to go," Kalen urged, disconnecting from the ancient interface. "The diversion won't distract security forever." Lyra seemed frozen in place, overwhelmed by the revelation. Kalen touched her arm gently, the first voluntary physical contact between them. "Lyra, we need to move." The touch seemed to break her trance. She straightened, her compound eyes refocusing. Yes, the maintenance vessel. Bay 14. They retraced their path to the lift, the data crystal secure in Kalen's combat suit. The journey upward felt interminable, each second increasing the risk of discovery. When the doors finally opened at sublevel 6, they were greeted by chaos. The promised diversion had escalated beyond expectation. Alarms blared throughout the facility. Emergency protocols had been activated, sealing off sections and redirecting security forces. "What happened?" Kalen asked as they navigated the confusion. "The slave uprising must have spread beyond the initial containment," Lyra replied, leading him through a series of maintenance tunnels to avoid the main corridors. "This works in our favor. Security will be focused on controlling the population, not hunting escaped prisoners." They emerged on level 3, close to the docking bays. The sounds of conflict echoed from multiple directions. Energy weapons discharge, shouted orders, the crash of riot suppression equipment. "Bay 14 is through the next section," Lyra indicated. "The maintenance vessel is prepped for immediate launch." They rounded a corner and found their path blocked by a security checkpoint. Unlike the previous guards they had encountered, these were elite Stari warriors in full combat gear, veterans selected for their loyalty and skill. "Commander Lyra," the squad leader addressed her formally. "You are directed to assist in quelling the uprising in Section 4. And, his compound eyes fixed on Kalen, the human prisoner is scheduled for execution. Why is he equipped with combat gear?" Lyra didn't hesitate. "By my authority as arena champion, I am personally escorting this prisoner to a secure location. The scheduled execution will proceed once the facility is stabilized." The squad leader's bioluminescent patterns indicated suspicion. "Your authorization code, Commander." Lyra knew the game was up. These elite guards would verify any code she provided. She exchanged a brief glance with Kalen, a silent communication passing between them. "Now," she said simply. They moved in perfect synchronization, as if they had fought together for years rather than hours. Kalen fired the neural disruptor at the two guards on the left, while Lyra engaged the squad leader directly. The confined space of the checkpoint worked to their advantage, preventing the guard from using their superior numbers effectively. The firefight was intense, but brief. Kalen's phantom training, combined with the neural disruptor, made him a devastatingly effective combatant in close quarters. Lyra's strength and intimate knowledge of Sthari combat techniques complemented his approach perfectly. Within moments, the checkpoint was secured. "They'll have reported the encounter," Lyra said, checking the perimeter. "We have minutes at most before reinforcements arrive." They sprinted the remaining distance to docking Bay 14, encountering no further resistance. The maintenance vessel waited, its systems already powered up according to Lyra's earlier preparations. Unlike the military craft that dominated the other bays, this was a utilitarian vehicle designed for infrastructure repair and minimal crew. "The controls are simplified," Lyra explained as they boarded. "Navigation is pre-programmed for Karisk Station, a neutral trading hub with minimal Imperial presence." Kalen moved to the pilot's seat, quickly familiarizing himself with the interface. "What about you? Your genetic signature will trigger alarms the moment you try to leave the system." Lyra hesitated, her tall form filling the narrow cockpit. "I had not planned beyond ensuring your escape." Kalen looked up from the controls, meeting her compound eyes. "That's not acceptable. You're coming with me." "I am sorry," she said quietly. "I have committed atrocities in the name of an empire built on lies. My presence would endanger your mission." "My mission has evolved," Kalen replied. "The truth about Helios and the starry origins is only valuable if it reaches those who need to hear it, both humans and Stari. You're living proof that even those most indoctrinated can change when confronted with truth." Before Lyra could respond, the ship's proximity alerts activated. Security forces approaching Bay 14. Lockdown procedures initiating. Kalen's hands flew across the controls, overriding safety protocols and initiating emergency launch procedures. "Decision time, Commander. Stay and face execution for treason, or come with me and help expose a 15,000-year-old lie." The bay doors began to close as security forces appeared at the entrance, weapons raised. Lyra looked from them to Kalen, her past and a possible future hanging in the balance. "Go," she said, taking the co-pilot's seat. The maintenance vessel's engines roared to life, pushing it through the narrowing gap of the bay doors with meters to spare. Weapons fire followed them, most shots glancing off the vessel's reinforced hull. Within moments, they were clear of the facility, accelerating toward the upper atmosphere. "Pursuit craft launching," Lyra reported, monitoring the tactical display. "Imperial interceptors. Faster and better armed than this vessel." "We don't need to outfight them," Kalen said, pushing the engines beyond their rated capacity. "We just need to reach the jump point before they get a weapons lock." The small vessel shuddered under the strain as Kalen executed a series of evasive maneuvers that no maintenance craft was ever designed to perform. Behind them, 3 Stari interceptors closed the distance with alarming speed. "Jump calculations complete," Lyra announced. "Coordinates locked for Karisk Station." The first shots from the pursuers streaked past their hull, the targeting algorithms adjusting with each near miss. The next volley would likely connect. Jump initiation in 3, 2. A blast rocked the vessel, knocking out secondary systems and sending damage reports cascading across the control screens. "Hull breach contained," Lyra reported. "Jump drive still operational." 1. Kalen activated the jump sequence. Space distorted around them as the drive engaged, stretching reality like a membrane before punching through to the dimensional corridor that would carry them to safety. The pursuing interceptors and Xylos itself disappeared, replaced by the swirling energies of jump space. For several minutes, neither spoke. The reality of what they had done, the theft of classified information, the escape from an Imperial facility, the defection of a high-ranking Stari commander, hung between them like a tangible force. Finally, Lyra broke the silence. "What happens now?" Kalen secured the ship's autopilot before turning to face her. "Now we use what we've learned. The data from the archives contains evidence that could fundamentally change how the Empire functions, not by destroying it, but by forcing it to confront its true origins. Many will resist," Lyra cautioned. "The ancestral ascension myth is the foundation of Imperial culture. To dismantle it is to invite chaos. Not if the revelation comes with a path forward," Kalen countered. "Not destruction, but transformation. The Stari Empire reimagined as a collaborative force rather than a conquering one." Lyra studied him with those complex, compound eyes. "You are either the most idealistic human I have encountered, or the most calculating." Kalen allowed himself a small smile, the first genuine expression she had seen from him. Perhaps a bit of both. The maintenance vessel continued its journey through jump space, carrying its unlikely passengers toward an uncertain future. On board, a human phantom operative and his Thari commander, former enemies bound by shared discovery, began planning a revolution based not on violence, but on truth. The data crystal containing evidence of the Empire's origins rested securely between them, its contents potentially more devastating than any weapon either had wielded in the arena. And as the stars streaked past in the swirling patterns of jump space, both reflected on the strange path that had brought them here. From a brutal arena encounter that had begun with contempt and ended with mutual respect, to a partnership that might reshape the political landscape of known space. She called me slave and spat in my face, Kalen mused quietly. It seems a lifetime ago now. I was blind then, Lyra replied, seeing only what I had been conditioned to see. And now, she turned to the view screen, watching the hypnotic patterns of jump space. Now I see that freedom comes in many forms, sometimes in the breaking of physical chains. Her compound eyes shifted to the data crystal, and sometimes in the breaking of chains we didn't even know we wore. The ship sailed on toward Karisk Station, the first stop on a journey that would take them into the heart of both human and Zthari territories, carrying a truth that had remained buried for 15 millennia. What had begun in an arena with humiliation and a 15-second combat would end in the greater arena of galactic politics, with consequences neither could fully predict. But one thing was certain: the universe would never be the same again.